A very good morning once again to each and every one of you. So, welcome to our day 10 of our 21-day challenge. Welcome to our study club. So, as I was mentioning yesterday, also as I was mentioning previously, when we sleep early, we can wake up early. And in order to sleep early, of course, we need to resist so many temptations given the circumstances we are in. Last night, I slept by 9:15 or around 9:20 p.m. I went into sleep. I tried sleeping from 9 o'clock, so 15, 20 minutes past 9, I went into sleep. And I could wake up by 3:45 or 4, even before the alarm, right? So that was very surprising on my part because we're used to wake up in response to alarms, but I could actually wake up even before the alarm started ringing. And from 4, it was all very energetic and enthusiastic. I was very excited and looking forward, not just towards the live session, but to perform various other activities, which I got used to personally for the past 9 to 10 days. I hope you guys are also excited to start your day early. So again, welcome to 5 a.m. Club. So in today's discussion, again, we'll follow the same format, general discussion followed by subject discussion. I hope you have your notes ready along with you. We'll try to highlight certain important points which you can make a note of in the process. Shall we start? So day 10, we are almost halfway in our journey. So let's keep this momentum going. Today's general discussion will look into the feelings of insecurity. Why do we have these feelings of insecurity and what's the basis for these feelings? Because once we know the etiology, we can work towards treatment plan, isn't it? So the feeling of insecurity is based upon a concept of belief of inner inadequacy. If you feel that you do not measure up to what is required, you feel insecure. A great deal of insecurity is not due to the fact that our inner resources are actually inadequate, but due to the fact that we use a false measuring stick. We compare our actual abilities to an imagined ideal, perfect, or absolute self. Thinking of yourself in terms of absolutes induces insecurity. In fact, perfection, the word perfection is a myth. There is nothing like perfection. There is subjective variation. So, this feeling of insecurity stems from the fact that it's not about our actual inadequacies, but it's because we have this false measuring stick. Thanks to the external environment or external conditions to which we are measured upon on a day-to-day basis, we feel sick of ourselves in the process and we feel very insecure because, as rightly mentioned, we're using or we're subjected to using a false measuring stick. So, as we have been discussing for the past couple of days, each and every one of us is unique and special in our own way, and we all have potential which we need to tap into. So, it depends upon the timing, it depends upon the situations. So, instead of being worried about measuring up to someone else's yardstick or scale, we need to work on our own scale, which we create based on our understanding of the external factors. So the feeling of insecurity is based upon a concept of belief of inner adequacy. So it's not the actual inner adequacy, but it's about the fact that we use a false measuring stick. And it's all about comparison. So we tend to compare ourselves with some idealistic way or idealistic person, the so-called idealistic person, and we start experiencing these feelings of insecurity, which is like a ripple effect. In fact, it's considered as one of the symptoms or one of the features of failure. We've seen frustration yesterday. So, insecurity is also considered as one of the signs and symptoms of a failure. So, now you know that the real reason behind insecurity, which is our feeling towards ourselves, I'm sure we can modify the same. And overcome these feelings of insecurity. Because as a matter of fact, each and everyone is special and unique in our own way. And if we are comparing ourselves to someone else or to some idealistic way, we are insulting ourselves in the process, isn't it? So, with these introductory remarks, let's move into our academic part of discussion. So, today we'll highlight various enterotoxins and exotoxins, microbiological perspective. So, we'll look into various microorganisms, the diseases they're causing in the process through enterotoxins and exotoxins. So, as the name itself indicates, these toxins are those which are produced outside, outside, right? So they're released into the body, or they're released outside from the cell, from the bacterial cell, upon where they'll start acting, causing various unwanted effects to the host. Endotoxin, as you know, is something which is produced within. We'll get back to that briefly later. So these enterotoxins and exotoxins are two classes of toxins that are produced by bacteria. An exotoxin, as the name itself indicates, is a toxin that is produced by bacterium and then released from cell into surrounding environment, as we have just discussed. The damage caused by exotoxin can only occur upon release. This is very, very important. As a general rule, of course, it's important as well as interesting. As a general rule, you can make a note of it. Enterotoxins tend to be produced by gram-positive bacteria rather than gram-negative bacteria, and we have an exception, that is Vibrio cholera. What's the difference between exotoxin and enterotoxin? Before we get back to this point, so as mentioned in the bottom of this page, of this slide, an enterotoxin is a type of exotoxin that acts on the intestinal wall, lumen, right? Whereas we have different types of exotoxins. Take another example, that is neurotoxin, which disrupts nerve cells. Now, as a general rule, the one which is highlighted in yellow, enterotoxins tend to be produced by gram-positive bacteria than gram-negative bacteria. However, we have an exception such as Vibrio cholera, which is gram-negative, facultative anaerobe, and comma-shaped, if you remember. So exceptions such as potent enterotoxin produced by Vibrio cholera, in contrast to gram-positive bacteria, many gram-negative species possess a molecule called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. A portion of lipopolysaccharide called lipid A is a cell-associated toxin or endotoxin, as you're all familiar with. In fact, you might have seen the differences between gram-positive and gram-negative, and I'm 100% sure that you might have come across this point, right? Also, as we have seen just now, enterotoxin is a type of exotoxin that acts on intestinal wall. Another type of exotoxin is neurotoxin, which disrupts nerve cells. In continuation, many kinds of bacterial exotoxins and enterotoxins exist, and for example, an exotoxin produced by Staphylococcus aureus is the cause of toxic shock syndrome, which can produce various symptoms such as nausea, fever, sore throat, collapse of central nervous and circulatory systems. Toxic shock syndrome. Another example is Staphylococcus aureus producing enterotoxin B, which is associated with foodborne illness. And before we move any further, there is a difference between food intoxication and food poisoning. Let's find out what the difference is. Growth of bacteria in improperly handled foods leads to excretion of enterotoxins, and ingestion of this toxin contaminated food surfaces. The food produces fever, chills, headache, chest pain, and a persistent cough. This is known as food intoxication. So you're taking food which already has various exotoxins, right? And to distinguish it from bacteria foodborne illness that results from growth of bacteria following ingestion of the food, which is termed as food poisoning. So after you ingest food and after there is bacterial growth inside our bodies, right, and the negative effects which we experience as a consequence of that, so that's termed as food poisoning. Whereas food intoxication is a different phenomenon, slightly different phenomenon, isn't it? Now, make sure that you have clarity in difference between food intoxication and food poisoning. Now, let's move on. So enterotoxins have three different bases of activity. Number one, so one type of enterotoxin which is exemplified by diphtheria toxin, which causes destruction of host cell to which it binds by creating pores. Typically, the binding of toxin causes the formation of a hole or pore in host cell membrane. Another example for this type of toxin which produces pores is aerolysin produced by Aeromonas hydrophilia. You can just make a note of these examples. And the second type of enterotoxin is known as superantigen toxin, which attracts or alerts the immune system, especially T cells. So, superantigen exotoxins work by overstimulating the immune response, particularly with respect to T cells. Examples of superantigen exotoxins include those produced by Staphylococcus aureus and from the flesh-eating bacterium Streptococcus pyogenes, right? And then a third type of enterotoxin known as AB toxin, which work as a team to produce the unwanted effects. So AB toxin consists of two or more toxin subunits that work together as a team to exert their destructive effect. Typically, the A subunit binds to host cell, as we have seen in first mechanism, forms a channel through the membrane. The channel allows a B subunit to get into the cell. Example of an AB toxin is enterotoxin that is produced by Vibrio cholera. If you remember, we discussed this as a potent enterotoxin, and it's an exception. Being a gram negative, producing enterotoxin, you can make a note of it. So the cholera toxin disrupts the ionic balance of host's intestinal cell membrane. As a result, the cells of small intestine exude a large amount of water in the intestine. Dehydration results, which can be lethal if not treated. However, there is a good news here. In contrast to the destructive effects of some exotoxins, the AB exotoxin does not damage the structure of affected host cells, which gives us an opportunity to allow for complete recovery when treatment is instituted at the right time. So, therefore, in case of cholera toxin, treatment can lead to full resumption of host cell activity, right? So these are some of the points which I wanted to highlight with respect to exotoxins, in specific enterotoxins. You can make a note of all these important points in the process, and you need any further clarification, of course, you can get back through mail 24/7, right? So these are some of the topics which I wanted to highlight in this specific video. In fact, any session should not extend by more than 15-20 minutes, and we're trying our level best to conclude all the sessions within this time frame. Sometimes it extends beyond 20 minutes. As the reason behind this is studies clearly show, and my experience clearly shows, that any session which extends 15 or 20 minutes, beyond 15 or 20 minutes, the concentration potential decreases. It's difficult to focus on. The same holds true for any lecture, online or offline. So keeping those stats or facts in mind, we're trying to keep these sessions short. Your feedback, of course, is always welcome. And before we conclude, let's summarize all that we have discussed so far. Initially, we have seen something about insecurity in our life at any particular stage. We often have these feelings of insecurity. And if we start probing why, and why, we'll obviously know the reason. Is it because we lack talent, or is it because we are having a false measuring stick in our mind? So we should ask ourselves that question more frequently than ever, uh, especially in these circumstances, because there is a lot of comparison going on, and competition is so severe. I mean, of course, it's a rat race. The competition, not in good terms, but in bad terms, is very high, and we need to save ourselves in the process. And if we get lost through these feelings of frustration, insecurity, I mean, it's us who are going to lose in the process, and there are certain things which we can't just describe in words, as I mentioned prior. So we need to take care of ourselves, and ultimately, whether we succeed or not, that's a secondary thing. Because what really matters is, are we realizing our complete potential? If so, we'll have our own success in our own way when we stop resorting to these idiotic and childish comparisons. And also in the academic part, we have seen about various enterotoxins and exotoxins, various microorganisms elaborating these exotoxins. And also we have seen an exception of bacteria being a gram-negative yet releasing potent enterotoxin, that is Vibrio cholerae. And also we have seen how endotoxin is released, or what's the basis of endotoxin in gram-negative bacteria. And finally, we've seen three different modes of action of enterotoxins on how they act on host cells and cause these unwanted effects, right? So with this, let's conclude our 10th day of 5 a.m. Club live session. I hope you found the session informative. And before I conclude, just remember, it's all about working hard, working consistently, and most importantly, believing in ourselves. So day 10 is a classic example of the fact that when you have consistency, or when you do things consistently, everything that you do turns into magic, isn't it? And also, many actually ask us this question: how can you wake up early in the morning? It's very simple. When you anticipate good things and when you link up good positive things happen at this particular time, then you'll automatically have the drive to wake up early in the morning. Since you have to wake up early in the morning, you'll obviously sleep early during night. So it's all a kind of linking effect, if I can say. So, anyways, I'm really glad that you guys are joining me in the 5 a.m. club. I really appreciate your enthusiasm. And as I keep on telling you, this is just 10th day, and we're experiencing so many positive things. Just imagine how you would feel and appreciate on 21st day and for the rest of your lifetime if we start incorporating these much wanted positive good habits which have the potential to enhance our personal and professional life. So wish you all a great day. Love you all.